Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with Hero Academia chapter 212, my impressions. We are doing this really early. For the record, this chapter officially is coming out on January 7th, roughly, right? So this chapter is super early because of the leaks. The holiday season always does this. We always get chapters super early, then we have to wait a little bit. But yeah, this thing officially comes out on January 7th. So because of that, we're going to take some extra considerations, and I am not going to put pictures from this chapter, aside from maybe one, because it's just words, into this video itself. Okay, cool. So this chapter gave us some pretty cool stuff, and also a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. We got the solution to Izuku's dilemma, and it was Shinso. You know, last video, I was not rooting for it. I was pretty sure Shinso wasn't going to do anything. And the solution here, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's totally fine. But I do have quite a few problems with it personally. That said, again, you know, if you don't take it that seriously, it's totally fine. So in the video, we will be going through why I have, you know, doubts about it, or not doubts, but you know, why I'm questionable about the move that the author pulled here. And then we're also going to talk about Ochako. It's not very often that we get to talk about Ochako, and the stuff presented at the very beginning of the chapter I think is very interesting to talk about, and that part I definitely want your opinions on. But anyway, before we get into the breakdown of the whole Shinso Izuku thing, this was a very short chapter, not a problem, and we ended off with seeing one of the one for all vestiges. So it's really cool. I'm pretty excited we got to see this one in particular. I have a picture from one of the earlier chapters. This was around, I think, chapter 193. So we got to see the bald guy in this lineup, and I like him. I was pretty excited about that. Honestly, I'm not surprised that he popped up. Like, listen, from the moment that, well, no, if you guys had watched the All Might's Secret Power video that I did way back when, I know a few of you did. I remember that Hunter x Hunter DRA, I know you did for sure, you saw that video. But you know, ever since that video, the idea of Izuku communing with the previous One for All spirits, it's there. I was pretty sure it was going to happen, and you know, we just keep seeing more of that. Now we're seeing him talk to the bald guy. That's par for the course. Now there are the two shadowed figures. I think those guys are going to be plot relevant, and they're probably also the ones who have One for All mastered to the furthest degree. Just from the lineup, like the way that lineup looks, that's what I'm assuming, but not the point. Point is, we got to see this guy, and it's pretty cool. Now he's talking in puzzles. Like, I don't really understand what to pull out from him. He's talking about something being manifested, and that he said that he's not Izuku's not alone. That's all really cool. I wonder what exactly is going on there. Like, I don't recall this guy saying that Izuku's not alone, but it's possible that the One for All vestiges are also like a bit of a hive mind, in that, you know, Nana and this guy might be separate, but they fall under a collective eye. You get what I mean? Like, Nana could speak for this guy, and maybe she could also speak for the original One for All holder. That said, it's just trying to understand what those lines mean. They're just talking about things manifesting, but honestly, when it comes to these vestiges, the natural conclusion that we're going to be seeing coming out of these guys, I think it's only a matter of time, is that Izuku's going to unlock a maximum of 5 new quirks along with the One for All stockpile, right? Because we know that All Might didn't have one, and we know that the first guy, we know what his quirks were, right? And I think these other guys, until we find out that the other guys had no quirks at all in the same case as All Might, we can assume that One for All took their quirks and incorporated it into itself. So it's only a matter of time till we see One for All upgrades for Izuku. And honestly, we recently got to see lightning destroying things, so that might be someone's quirk. That might be this guy's quirk, in all honesty. We don't know. The lightning being able to destroy surroundings, that might be all this guy. And that's pretty exciting. So just a matter of time. This was gonna happen. One for All, from the basic package, One for All was a boring quirk. From the moment that Izuku went 100% with One for All, it was clear that there were going to be new horizons with One for All's capabilities, just because that's the nature of shonen, and was kind of gonna push it along that way. That said, I'm so happy that Izuku is having a conversation with someone other than the progenitor of One for All. Okay, so now let's move backwards through time and through into Shinzo. Like, first off, before we get into the breaking down his power thing, Shinzo's little monologue here was really good. I liked it. I liked that he wants to fight with Izuku again. I thought that was nice. I thought that was great. I hope that one day he understands that Izuku was not born with this power. He just got really lucky. I mean, it doesn't change the whole luck narrative because Izuku's still a very lucky kid. But I do want to see these guys become friends. That's what I'm rooting for. That's where I want to go. I think that would be great. One last thing just to say is that chances are this tragedy is still not over. We need to see next chapter, because maybe next chapter One for All kind of bursts out of control again, given what we've seen in its past. But on that note, let's talk about just the logic of the Shinzo interaction with the One for All quirk. Alright, so the big clue, or the big goal here, was to get Shinzo to control Izuku, and as we see, it more or less works, at least in this chapter, right? We see that the darkness just kind of goes back into Izuku's arm. Now look, let me just preface this again. I'm okay with this happening in the broad scheme of things, but when you look at the specifics, I don't think this followed naturally. I don't think this made sense. And to make it make sense, you have to make a few assumptions. Now, to preface this, I've mentioned it in the Monoma theory video that I did, like, I think a week or two ago, but I have very little faith in the author's ability to keep things consistent when it comes to his powers. In the past, we've had a situation with Medio where he has a stipulation where the air escapes his lungs, but yet he's able to talk through the floor. That doesn't work. That's not how that should work. We've had the situation with Momo where the author maybe was not aware of the ramifications of giving Momo the ability to make electronics, because that pushes her to a whole other level of incredibleness. We've had the situation with Aizawa where his quirk was changed over time. Did you know that Aizawa's quirk actually can affect mutant shapes? It's just, it can't erase them, but it can stop them from moving. So if you had a four-armed person, that person can't use two of their arms, given the logic that we got during the overhaul arc. And also Shinzo, as I remember Skelly pointed it out, Shinzo had his quirk nerfed, possibly. I still need to go back and confirm that myself. And then there's also like just the other little things of the author just not paying attention to the little logistical things, like, you know, Momo again, and also what happens if, say, Tetsu is red hot steel, implying that he's 500 degrees Celsius. Oh man, I wonder what's going to happen to Todoroki, who's in such close proximity to him and is prone to getting his face burnt, right? It's little things like that. The author has shown that he doesn't really look at the little details or the ramifications of really big powers, which isn't a really big deal in the long scheme of things. It's just naturally that's going to happen. You shouldn't expect one person to be able to keep track of all the different properties that he's creating in this fiction. But when it comes to the Izuku and Shinzo situation, I think this is one area where it's just a little bit too glaring for me myself personally. So the problem here is, here's like the general idea that the guy was going for, right? Izuku's going out of control. Izuku can't control it, so One for All, the quirk, is going out of control, so Shinzo's going to take control of Izuku to stop the quirk, right? But here's the problem. That doesn't match previously observed logic regarding One for All, because when you go back to the sports festival, Shinzo took control of Izuku, but that didn't stop One for All from activating and breaking Izuku's fingers. That moment tells you One for All is independent of Izuku's brainwashed state. So in this chapter, when you have One for All being affected by the brainwashed state in such a manner that it's halting its function, like, I'm looking at it with like a little bit of suspicion. You know, is it gonna lead into another chapter where it breaks out of control? Or is this just a solution? Again, there's no reason to expect that One for All itself could be controlled by the brainwashed state when we've seen evidence to the contrary. Now, there's ways of trying to justify it. You know, you could say, well, maybe Izuku has more of a grip on it such that his will actually is involved in activating or deactivating it. And, you know, that could very well be true, but I think that's a bit of a downgrade given that it's been able to act independent of the brainwashed will before. You could also say something like maybe when the One for All vestiges saw that Izuku receded into them, because we did get the dream sequence again, maybe they stopped it after they noticed that Izuku was out of commission. But then that also is, it doesn't really make sense. If the One for All things have that much compassion, they could have stopped it earlier if they have that much control, right? Ultimately, where I land on this is that the brainwashing quirk has not shown that it can control the one for all quirk. So seeing this happen here, I'm just sketched out. Mind you, if next chapter we go in and One for All starts acting up again while Izuku's brainwashed, then we know, you know, this was just a bit of it was like an intermediary point. There was still more to come, and at which point these complaints will be pretty much tossed away. But that's where I land on this. I think it makes for a clean solution, but I think it just doesn't respect the logic that it was established before. The bigger ramifications of choices like this, if this is how it stands, and like next chapter Izuku's back to normal, the bigger ramifications about this is that you just realistically, you can't rely on what the author does in the past to predict what will happen in the future, right? And then that'll eventually evolve or devolve depending on your perspective into the author just making things up when it's convenient for him. And I'm saying this from the perspective of someone that's read a lot of shonen manga. You know, after seeing Naruto, Bleach, and all the others, there's no reason to expect that this author is immune to those trappings too, right? So that's the problem here. It's specifically, you have observable behavior from the past, and it's not exactly coherent with the future. And, you know, what does that mean if it happens on a bigger scale as we go along in the story of Hero Academia? But either way, it's not that big of a deal. It's just, if you care about the power schemes, it's a bigger deal for you. Anyway, moving into another topic, and that's Ochako. We don't get Ochako that often, and honestly, this part, I'm much more interested in knowing what you guys think about it. I'm again going to come at it from the perspective of someone who's read a lot of shonen manga. And just talk about this little thing that Ochako's having here. So she really has two really important pages that are just informing something about her character. But it's funny, these pages ultimately, I'm not sure how I feel about them. That's why I really want to hear what you guys are saying. So like, it starts off with Ochako pointing out that she could tell that her parents were always tired. Then she has linking happy faces to seeing heroes in actions. And, you know, we have a beautiful shot of Kid Ochako. It looks so adorable. She loves seeing people's faces. And then she goes into saying that, you know, that's why helping people was just always a given for her, right? Okay, so that's all good. Then we move into the next page where it moves her into another direction, where she's now been watching Izuku saving people, and it's making her wonder, you know, who's going to protect people like Izuku when they're in pain? Like, who's going to be Izuku's help when he's in pain, when he's a hero, right? And then that leads us into her supporting Izuku. So that makes sense, right? That those two pages in regards to the result of page 3 makes a lot of sense. You have her setting up that she wants to be someone who potentially wants to protect heroes when they're in pain. That's all good. The problems here though, or at least the problems that I see coming from this, I'm not sure if it's abandoned too much of Ochako and traded in some of her qualities for Izuku qualities. Because again, on the introduction page, we are told, okay, Ochako has a past that makes her think that helping people is just a given, or is always a given. So that's effectively an Izuku-like quality. That's the quality that makes Izuku run in to save Bakugo, right? That's an Izuku-like quality. Not saying that Izuku has a monopoly on that quality, but you know, just for you guys to get the idea. Furthermore, we have her talking about her parents. Now we know that Ochako initially wanted to be a hero for the money. Now mind you, that little bit about seeing her parents tired, you could say that that's consistent with her wanting to be a construction worker, or you know, like floating that idea to her parents and wanting to make money. You could say that's consistent because ultimately it would make her parents happy and they wouldn't be so tired all the time. The problem that I'm having here, or just the kind of resistance I'm having here, is that this first page of that little flashback ignores little Ochako and some of Ochako's money saving qualities. Because here's the thing, is Ochako's character has quite a little bit to do with money. So much so that, you know, when you look at the manga volumes, there's little pages about Ochako's money saving tips, where she specifically that does things like not turn on the AC during summer or something to save a few dollars. It's really interesting, but it tells you that's a little bit of a quirk to Ochako's character. And we also know that when Ochako was a kid, she was already concerned about her parents being needing help at the construction site or something like that. So in this first little page, I'm just a little bit bothered that we don't get to see that aspect very clearly. Like, mind you, it's not a big deal because you can still say that Ochako developed from this point into the more wanting to help her parents route later on, and that's totally fair. But the interesting thing here is just that she got that very Izuku-like quality. And then on the second page, we have when a hero is in pain, who will protect them? That pretty much tells me that she's going to support Izuku, right? Which isn't bad in the microcosm of Hero Academia, but in the macrocosm of Shonen Jump series, this is, I'm kind of concerned, right? Because this is what's going to separate Ochako from like a Sakura role or a Hinata role or even an Orihime type role, right? Because, you know, wanting to protect Ichigo when he was in trouble, that was a big part of Orihime's character towards the final arc, right? It's just this mindset of wanting to protect the main character, or, you know, setting her up to want to protect the main character. I don't think it has a good track record. I don't think it has a good track record given Naruto's infamy with Sakura and just what Orihime ended up amounting to in the final arc of Bleach, right? That's why I'm kind of apprehensive here. And in my eyes, giving her that Izuku-like quality now, like slapping that onto her when her previous heroic quality was, you know, wanting to help her parents, I'm kind of concerned just in terms of what direction does the author want to take Ochako in. If he's moving her into a more stereotypical main female character of a Shonen Jump series, that's not good. That is not good at all. So it's gonna be a matter of seeing what happens in the future, and if Ochako is going to remain Ochako enough. Like, honestly, I don't need her virtuous. I don't need the virtuous form of her that wants to save people no matter how much trouble they are in. I don't need that from her. I like previous Ochako because at least previous Ochako, like, she has real life problems. So far, we've seen the author give this quality to Izuku, and we've also seen this kind of quality maybe start to get into Mina, but we haven't seen how the author wants to handle this. And right now, given how the author handles the female characters, I'm not too confident. So the good things here are that this gives Ochako a much better defined route. It still kind of does revolve around Izuku's well-being, but it could branch out to other heroes being affected in it as well. But it's a route that's with a lot of peril, especially depending on the editor who's with this author right now. If he decides to do more traditional things with the female character, it's not going to be a great time. Now, the final part of this whole thing is Ochako's conclusion here. And guys, I'm sorry for such a long video, but this chapter had a lot to talk about. When a hero is in pain, who will protect them? Now, this is a bit of a bigger question, and I do want your opinion on this as well. But I do appreciate Ochako's journey to this question, right? When a hero is in pain, who will protect them? She's thinking about the well-being of heroes. But the thing is, in the general sense, we have already seen this question answered. We saw it with Ragdoll. We saw what happened when Ragdoll was in pain. We saw what happened when Ragdoll was crying about what she was victim of when she lost her quirk. And we saw who was there to help them when they were in pain. It was her friends. It was her team of heroes. It was the Pussycats, that family unit. They're the ones who came around and helped Ragdoll. I think we can all remember that panel where Ragdoll was crying while she was being held by all her friends. That's who's going to protect heroes. It's people like them, right? It's their sidekicks. Like when you have support heroes who support the bigger hero, that's who protects them. The people around them. So it's interesting. Like, this question is set up to put Ochako in the role of supporting Izuku, right? But I don't think that works narratively in the grand scheme of things in the Hero Academia manga in particular, because in Hero Academia, the heroes don't have to be alone. they get to have support systems. They get to have other heroes who will help them. They get to have support heroes. Now, mind you, notice what happened with Izuku. Izuku's been slotted into a fight with a great evil, and that's pretty much only Izuku at this present time can handle that fight. So look at what happened there. Izuku's been narratively isolated from every other hero because he has to go and do that mission. That's why like Ochako being his support makes more sense in the Izuku context. But that question of who will protect them is an irrelevant question in the sense that we've seen the answers in the rest of the Hero Academia world. So the author is setting this big question up as being like he's making it look like this is a big defining quality of Ochako, that question. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big deal of a question. Like in terms of idealism, yeah, it's a big question. In terms of Izuku, a big question. In terms of every other person in the world, no. It's a very simple question that you can see it in other people. Other people have dealt with heroes being in pain, and we've seen who comes to their aid when things are going wrong. So everyone, I really want to know what you think. What do you think about all of this? If you have any opinions on any of the little topics presented in this video. Ultimately, I really like the chapter. I think it's really interesting to talk about narrative and you know, the clash between narrative and the world's logic itself. Again, I think this whole thing about what happens to heroes when they're in pain, who's going to protect them, I think that idea works better when you don't have a society full of heroes, just because you end up seeing the answer to that question. I think, you know, I already put my piece about the power stuff going on here. Overall, really fun chapter to talk about. Let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.